Stay with me, because what happened at the Blackwood Charity Gala that night destroyed a billionaire's perfect image in less than 60 seconds. The sound wasn't loud. Not really. But in the middle of a ballroom filled with crystal chandeliers, soft piano music, and the quiet conversations of Manhattan's elite, the sharp crack of Nathaniel Graves slamming his champagne glass onto the marble table felt like a gunshot. Every head turned. Every voice stopped. Claire Whitmore froze beneath the golden lights, one trembling hand resting protectively against the gentle curve of her 7-month pregnant belly, while tiny drops of champagne slid across the white tablecloth like spilled diamonds. Nathaniel stood across from her in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo worth more than most people's monthly rent, his jaw tight, his expression cold enough to freeze the entire room. Around them, billionaire investors, politicians, and celebrity donors pretended not to stare even though every single person in that ballroom was watching. Claire could feel it, the weight of their curiosity, the silent hunger people had whenever they sensed a powerful man losing control in public. "You couldn't even make it through one evening without embarrassing me," Nathaniel said quietly, but somehow his voice carried through the silence anyway. Claire swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry. The baby shifted nervously beneath her emerald maternity gown, as if even her unborn daughter could sense the tension thickening the air around them. "Nathaniel," she whispered carefully, "please lower your voice." That only made his expression darker. Across the ballroom, Vanessa Holloway leaned casually against the grand staircase with a crystal wine glass in one hand, her red designer dress glowing beneath the chandelier lights like fresh paint across snow. She wasn't supposed to be there tonight, at least not beside him, but she was, and everyone knew it. Claire saw the subtle looks exchanged between guests, the fake smiles, the pity hidden behind expensive jewelry and polished faces. New York society loved scandals almost as much as it loved money. Nathaniel loosened his cufflinks with slow, controlled movements, the same way men did when they were trying very hard not to explode. "I told you not to start drama tonight," he muttered. Claire stared at him in disbelief. Drama? As if finding your husband with another woman at your own charity gala counted as an inconvenience instead of heartbreak. Somewhere near the stage, a violinist stopped playing mid-song. The silence grew heavier. Claire suddenly became aware of the dozens of phones subtly lifting around the room. Screens glowing. Cameras recording. Because deep down, people always knew when history was about to happen. Vanessa took a slow sip of wine before smiling faintly, the kind of smile designed to wound, without saying a single word. Claire's stomach twisted. The scent of expensive perfume and champagne suddenly made her nauseous. She reached for the edge of the marble table to steady herself. Nathaniel noticed. But instead of concern, irritation flashed across his face. That was the moment something inside Claire finally cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like glass splintering beneath pressure after being held together far too long. And somewhere near the ballroom entrance, unnoticed by almost everyone in the room, a tall man in a dark navy suit lowered his phone after recording everything. Daniel Whitmore had just arrived. Claire could still hear the whispers long after she locked herself inside the marble bathroom overlooking the Hudson River. The gala music outside sounded distant now, muffled beneath the pounding of her heartbeat and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights reflecting against polished mirrors. She gripped the edge of the sink tightly, trying to steady the trembling in her hands while cold water ran over her fingers. Her wedding ring caught the light. 5 years ago, Nathaniel Graves had slipped that ring onto her hand inside a private vineyard in Napa Valley, while promising he would protect her for the rest of their lives. Back then, he had not been the face of Graves Capital. Back then, he was just a hungry young investor with ambitious dreams and expensive suits he could barely afford. Claire remembered helping him rehearse presentations in their tiny Brooklyn apartment, while eating takeout Chinese food at 2 in the morning because they could not afford anything else. She remembered editing contracts while balancing her own architecture projects, sitting beside him through endless nights while he built the empire everyone admired now. She remembered believing they were building it together. Another sharp kick from the baby pulled her back to reality. Claire pressed both hands gently against her stomach and closed her eyes. "I know," she whispered softly. "I know." Outside the bathroom door, she could hear muffled laughter drifting down the hallway. Rich people laughing. Comfortable people. The kind of people who viewed heartbreak as entertainment as long as it happened to someone else. Claire reached for a paper towel and dabbed carefully beneath her eyes before tears could ruin her makeup completely. Nathaniel hated when she cried in public. He said it made him look weak. The thought almost made her laugh now. Almost. Her phone buzzed quietly on the marble counter. One new notification. Vanessa Holloway had posted another photograph online less than 3 minutes ago. Claire stared at the glowing screen as her stomach tightened painfully. The picture showed Vanessa standing beside Nathaniel beneath the ballroom chandeliers with one manicured hand resting lightly against his chest while he smiled down at her with the same smile he used to reserve only for his wife. The caption underneath read, "Some women marry power. Some women inspire it." Thousands of likes were already pouring in. Claire felt heat rise into her face. Humiliation moved differently when it happened online. Faster, colder, permanent. She remembered the first time she met Vanessa 8 months ago during a Graves Capital holiday dinner. Nathaniel introduced her as the company's new public relations director. Young, brilliant, charismatic. Claire remembered the way Vanessa held eye contact just a second too long. The way Nathaniel suddenly started staying late at the office afterward. The canceled dinners. The business trips that became more frequent. The expensive perfume lingering on his jackets. At first, Claire blamed the pregnancy hormones like everyone kept, suggesting stress, exhaustion, emotions. But deep down, she had known long before tonight. Women always knew. Another notification flashed across her screen. This time it was from Nathaniel himself. 3 words. Do not overreact. Claire stared at the message for several seconds before slowly lowering the phone back onto the counter. Somewhere outside the bathroom, the ballroom erupted into applause as another donor's speech began. The Perfect Billionaire Gala continued like nothing had happened. But Claire suddenly realized something terrifying. Nathaniel was not worried about losing her anymore. He was only worried about losing control of the narrative. And somewhere downstairs near the grand staircase, Daniel Whitmore was already speaking quietly to hotel security while replaying the footage on his phone. Claire remained inside the bathroom for nearly 10 minutes before finally opening the door again. The noise of the gala rushed back instantly. Crystal glasses clinking. Expensive laughter. The soft echo of jazz drifting beneath towering ceilings wrapped in gold and marble. Manhattan's elite had already moved on to the next conversation because rich people treated humiliation the same way they treated market crashes. Interesting for a moment. Forgettable by midnight. Claire inhaled slowly and adjusted the sleeves of her emerald gown before stepping into the hallway again. She refused to let anyone see her fall apart. Not tonight. Not in front of them. The ballroom shimmered ahead of her like a movie set. Waiters carried silver trays loaded with champagne beneath massive chandeliers while investors and celebrities gathered near the stage pretending they had not witnessed the tension earlier. Claire immediately spotted Nathaniel near the center of the room, surrounded by board members from Graves Capital. Calm, smiling, untouched. It amazed her how easily powerful men could switch faces depending on who was watching. 1 minute cold enough to break your heart. The next minute charming enough to close a billion-dollar deal. Vanessa stood beside him wearing that same red dress, one hand lightly resting against his arm as if she already belonged there publicly. Claire felt the sting of betrayal all over again. But this time something else mixed with the pain. Clarity. She started walking toward them slowly. Her heels clicked softly against the polished marble floor while conversations around her faded one by one. People noticed. Of course they noticed. Tension like this pulled attention the same way lightning pulled eyes toward the sky. Nathaniel saw her approaching first. His smile disappeared almost immediately. Claire, he said tightly once she stopped in front of him. You should go home. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, pretending concern. Are you feeling all right? You look pale. The fake sweetness in her voice made Claire's stomach turn harder than the champagne ever could. Several nearby guests suddenly became very interested in their drinks, while secretly listening to every word. Claire looked directly at Nathaniel instead of Vanessa. How long? She asked quietly. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. This is not the place. 8 months. Claire continued, her voice calm enough to make him uncomfortable. 6 months? Before the pregnancy or after? Vanessa gave a soft laugh under her breath. Wrong move. Claire slowly turned toward her, and for the first time that night Vanessa's confident smile weakened slightly beneath the intensity in Claire's eyes. You posted photographs with my husband while I was sitting alone upstairs trying not to cry, Claire said softly. Did that make you feel powerful? The nearby silence became immediate. Sharp. Heavy. Nathaniel stepped closer. Enough. Claire ignored him. Years ago, she would have backed down instantly. Years ago, she would have apologized just to avoid conflict. But exhaustion had replaced fear now. Exhaustion and heartbreak, and something colder growing underneath both. Vanessa crossed her arms carefully. Nathaniel deserves someone who actually understands his world. The words landed like ice water. Claire stared at her for several seconds before answering. I built that world with him. Nathaniel looked around nervously as more phones slowly appeared throughout the ballroom. Investors whispered behind raised glasses. Someone near the staircase was already recording openly now. Claire noticed Nathaniel noticing it too. That was when she understood the truth completely. He was not ashamed of betraying her. He was ashamed of getting caught publicly. A waiter accidentally dropped a fork somewhere behind them, the metallic sound slicing through the silence. Vanessa leaned closer toward Claire with a smile that never reached her eyes. You should stop making scenes before you embarrass yourself further. Claire felt her daughter move suddenly beneath her gown. Strong, restless, alive. And for the first time all night, Claire did not feel weak. She lifted her chin slowly while staring directly at the woman standing beside her husband. No, she said quietly. I think the embarrassing part is only beginning. Across the ballroom entrance, Daniel Whitmore lowered his phone after receiving a new text message from a private investigator. The subject line contained only 4 words. Offshore accounts confirmed. The air inside the ballroom changed after Claire spoke those words. People felt it instantly. Conversations died halfway through sentences. Investors stopped pretending not to watch. Somewhere near the orchestra stage, a woman slowly lowered her champagne glass without taking a sip. Nathaniel Graves had spent 10 years building the image of a disciplined billionaire who controlled everything around him. Tonight, tiny cracks were beginning to show beneath the polished surface, and everyone in Manhattan's financial world was noticing. Nathaniel stepped closer to Claire until only a few inches separated them. Up close, she could smell expensive cologne mixed with whiskey beneath his calm exterior. You are emotional right now, he said quietly through clenched teeth. Go upstairs before you make this worse. Claire stared at him in disbelief. Emotional. That word again. The favorite weapon of men who wanted women silent without technically raising their voices. Vanessa folded her arms and gave a small sympathetic smile toward nearby guests, as if she were somehow the mature one trapped in an unfortunate situation. Claire, she said softly, people are trying to enjoy the evening. Claire almost laughed at the cruelty hidden beneath the sweetness. Around them, the ballroom lights reflected across polished marble floors and towering windows overlooking Manhattan's skyline. Outside, rain streaked softly against the glass 80 floors above the city, while inside everything smelled like roses, money, and quiet corruption. Claire suddenly felt exhausted all the way down to her bones. 7 months pregnant, humiliated in public, betrayed by the man she had loved for half her life, and still somehow expected to protect his reputation. Nathaniel glanced around nervously again before lowering his voice further. You are carrying my child, he muttered. Start acting responsibly. Something cold passed through Claire's chest then. Not pain anymore. Not sadness. Clarity. Your child? She repeated softly. Interesting. Because you stopped acting like a husband months ago. Several people nearby shifted uncomfortably. A board member from Graves Capital quietly stepped backward toward the bar. Nobody wanted to stand too close to an explosion once it became unavoidable. Vanessa suddenly stepped forward beside Nathaniel, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Maybe if you focused less on playing the victim and more on keeping your husband happy, we would not be standing here. The comment hit the room like shattered ice. Claire felt her fingers tighten instinctively around her clutch purse while the baby shifted again beneath her gown. A few guests exchanged horrified looks. Even wealthy Manhattan society had rules about what could be said publicly. Nathaniel did not defend Claire. He did not correct Vanessa. He simply stood there in silence beside the woman humiliating his pregnant wife. And somehow that silence hurt worse than anything else tonight. Claire slowly nodded as if finally understanding something important. Thank you, she whispered. Vanessa blinked. For what? Claire looked directly into Nathaniel's eyes when she answered. For finally showing me who you really are. Nathaniel's expression darkened immediately. Enough. His voice came out louder this time, sharp enough that nearby conversations stopped completely. Across the ballroom, cameras rose higher. Someone, near the staircase, whispered, "Oh my God," under their breath. Claire took one small step backward, more from exhaustion than fear. The marble floor suddenly felt unsteady beneath her heels. She reached instinctively toward the nearby table for balance. But before she could steady herself, Vanessa brushed past her shoulder carelessly while turning toward the crowd. It was not dramatic. Not enough for anyone to openly call it intentional. But it was enough. Claire lost balance for half a second, her hand slipping against the polished edge of the table while crystal glasses rattled loudly. Gasps rippled through the ballroom as Nathaniel instinctively reached forward too late. Claire caught herself before falling completely, one hand protectively shielding her stomach while her breathing turned uneven. The room froze. Absolute silence. Then suddenly another voice cut through the tension from across the ballroom entrance. "Do not touch my sister again." Daniel Whitmore's voice carried through the marble ballroom like thunder beneath calm skies. And for the first time that night, Nathaniel Graves looked nervous. Daniel Whitmore moved through the ballroom with the controlled calm of someone who had spent years walking into dangerous situations without flinching. At 6'3" with broad shoulders hidden beneath a dark navy suit, he looked less like a Manhattan executive and more like the former Marine officer he used to be. His sharp blue eyes locked immediately onto Claire as he crossed the marble floor, and the expression on his face changed the second he saw her struggling to steady her breathing. The crowd instinctively parted for him without a word. Powerful men recognized dangerous calm when they saw it. Daniel stopped beside his sister and gently placed one hand against her shoulder. "Claire," he said quietly, "look at me." Her eyes lifted toward him instantly. For the first time all night, the tension in her chest loosened slightly. Daniel had always been the steady one, the protector, the older brother who showed up before disasters became tragedies. "I am okay," she whispered automatically, even though they both knew it was not true. Daniel glanced briefly toward Nathaniel and Vanessa before looking back at Claire again. "No," he said softly. "You are not." The silence surrounding them deepened. Phones remained raised throughout the ballroom. People were openly recording now. Somewhere near the back wall, a reporter from a financial news network quietly stepped closer, pretending to check her phone while capturing every second. Nathaniel straightened his posture immediately, billionaire composure sliding back into place like armor. "Daniel," he said carefully, "this is a private family matter." Daniel's expression did not change. "Then maybe your mistress should not have turned it into a public performance." A few nervous laughs escaped from nearby guests before dying instantly beneath Nathaniel's glare. Vanessa folded her arms tightly. "Nobody touched your sister." Daniel slowly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen glowed against the ballroom lights. "Interesting," he replied calmly. "Because the hotel security footage says otherwise." Nathaniel's face changed for half a second. Tiny, almost invisible. But Daniel caught it immediately. So did Claire. Panic. Real panic. Around them, whispers spread faster now. "Security footage." The words moved through the gala like gasoline near open fire. Nathaniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Daniel, do not do this here." "Here," Daniel repeated quietly. "You humiliate my pregnant sister in front of 400 people, and now you suddenly care about privacy?" Claire felt tears sting her eyes again. But this time, they came from something different. Relief. Someone was finally standing beside her instead of asking her to stay silent for the comfort of powerful people. Vanessa attempted another smile, but it looked strained now beneath the ballroom lights. "You are overreacting." Daniel finally looked directly at her. "No," he said evenly. "What you are seeing is restraint." The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. Even the orchestra near the stage had stopped playing completely by now. Claire noticed several Graves Capital board members quietly slipping toward the exits while checking their phones nervously. Investors hated scandals almost as much as they hated investigations. Nathaniel noticed it too. His entire empire depended on image, trust, and controlled narratives. One viral video could cost millions overnight. Daniel's phone buzzed again in his hand. He glanced at the message briefly before his expression hardened further. Claire saw only one sentence reflected faintly across the screen before it disappeared. Additional wire transfers identified. Offshore Cayman accounts linked directly to Graves Holdings. Daniel slowly locked the phone and slid it back into his pocket. Nathaniel noticed the movement immediately. "What was that?" he asked sharply. Daniel ignored the question completely before turning back toward Claire instead. "You are leaving with me." Nathaniel stepped forward instantly. "She is my wife." Claire looked at him for several long seconds. Then quietly, calmly, with every eye in the ballroom fixed on her, she answered the one thing Nathaniel Graves never expected to hear in public. Not for much longer. The elevator ride down from the ballroom felt strangely silent despite the storm raging 80 floors above them. Claire sat against the leather bench inside the private hotel elevator while Daniel stood near the doors with both hands folded tightly in front of him, his jaw locked in the same controlled expression he wore during military funerals. Outside the glass walls of the descending elevator, Manhattan glittered beneath cold rain and blurred city lights. Claire stared at her reflection in the mirrored panel across from her and barely recognized the woman staring back. Smudged mascara, exhausted eyes, emerald silk wrapped around a body carrying new life, while her old life quietly collapsed around her. The baby shifted again beneath her ribs, softer this time, almost comforting. Daniel finally broke the silence. "How long have you known?" Claire lowered her gaze toward her wedding ring. "About Vanessa?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded once. Claire exhaled slowly. "I think part of me knew months ago." The elevator hummed softly around them. Nathaniel stopped coming home for dinner. Then he stopped calling. Then he started apologizing for things before I even asked questions. Daniel's expression darkened. "And you stayed." Claire gave a weak laugh that carried no humor at all. "That is the terrible thing about loving someone for too long. You learn how to explain away every warning sign." The elevator doors opened into the underground parking garage, where black luxury vehicles waited beneath harsh fluorescent lights. The cold air smelled faintly of rainwater and engine smoke. Daniel guided Claire carefully toward his SUV, while hotel security kept reporters from entering the garage upstairs. Even down here, she could still hear the distant echo of voices from the gala above. Her humiliation was probably already spreading across social media. Billionaire scandal. Pregnant wife. Public confrontation. Manhattan loved stories like this. Daniel opened the passenger door for her before pulling a thick envelope from inside the vehicle. Claire noticed immediately that his expression had changed again. More serious now. "What is that?" she asked softly. Daniel hesitated for half a second before handing her the envelope. "Something you deserve to see before Nathaniel starts lying." Claire slowly opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were bank statements, offshore transfer records, property documents, and photographs of Nathaniel entering private meetings with financial consultants she had never heard of before. Millions of dollars hidden across accounts in the Cayman Islands and Zurich. Shell corporations linked to Graves Holdings. Secret transactions dating back nearly 3 years. Claire's breathing slowed dangerously. "What is this?" she whispered. Daniel leaned against the SUV beside her. "Fraud investigators contacted me 6 weeks ago." Claire looked up sharply. "You knew?" "I suspected," Daniel corrected quietly. "I hired a private investigator after I saw Vanessa leaving Nathaniel's penthouse office at 2 in the morning." Claire felt physically ill. Rainwater dripped steadily somewhere deeper in the garage, while fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. "The company is being investigated for financial misconduct," Daniel continued carefully. "Nathaniel has been moving money offshore for years. If federal regulators uncover everything, Graves' capital could collapse overnight." Claire stared down at the documents again. Hidden accounts, false signatures, wire transfers. One signature near the bottom of a page made her stomach tighten instantly. Her own, except she had never signed it. "Daniel," she whispered slowly, "this is forgery." Daniel's silence confirmed everything. Claire suddenly understood why Nathaniel had become colder over the past year. Why he needed control. Why he needed her quiet. A pregnant wife made an excellent public distraction while powerful men buried dangerous secrets behind charity galas and smiling magazine covers. Her phone suddenly vibrated inside her purse. Nathaniel's name lit up the screen again. One new message appeared beneath it. "We need to talk before this gets worse." Claire stared at the words for several seconds before calmly locking the phone without replying. Daniel watched her carefully. "What are you going to do?" Claire slowly closed the folder and looked out toward the rain falling beyond the garage entrance. Somewhere above them, Manhattan still sparkled beneath wealth and power and beautiful lies. But something inside her had changed permanently tonight. "I am done protecting him," she said quietly. And across town, inside a private penthouse office overlooking Central Park, Nathaniel Graves was already discovering that several of his corporate accounts had suddenly been frozen. By sunrise, the scandal had already spread across Manhattan. Financial blogs posted blurry ballroom footage beneath headlines about billionaire infidelity, while anonymous accounts online debated whether Claire Whitmore would stay or disappear quietly like so many wealthy wives before her. But inside Daniel Whitmore's penthouse overlooking the East River, something very different was happening. Claire sat silently near the floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped in a cream cashmere robe, while early morning light spilled across polished hardwood floors. Rain still tapped softly against the glass. Her emerald gown from the gala hung discarded across a chair nearby, like evidence from another lifetime. On the marble coffee table in front of her sat stacks of documents Daniel had printed overnight. Bank transfers, corporate ledgers, property records, hidden agreements with forged signatures carrying her name. Every page revealed another layer of Nathaniel's deception. Claire pressed one trembling hand against her stomach while reading through the files again. Her daughter shifted gently beneath her ribs, as if reminding her she was not alone anymore. Daniel moved quietly through the kitchen preparing coffee, while speaking on speakerphone with attorneys from 2 different law firms. "No," he said firmly. "We are not discussing damage control. We are discussing criminal exposure." Claire listened without looking up. The words still felt unreal. Criminal exposure. Federal investigations. Frozen accounts. She remembered nights sitting beside Nathaniel while he promised they were building a future together. She remembered defending him during interviews, smiling beside him on magazine covers, standing silently beside him at charity galas while reporters called them Manhattan's golden couple. Meanwhile, he had been building secret escape routes behind her back the entire time. Her phone vibrated again beside the couch. 47 missed calls. 32 messages. Nathaniel. Board members. Public relations advisors. Unknown numbers from reporters. Vanessa had not contacted her once. That somehow hurt too. Claire slowly opened social media despite knowing she should not. Clips from the gala flooded every platform already. The moment Vanessa brushed past her. The moment Daniel confronted Nathaniel. The moment Claire quietly said not for much longer. Millions of views overnight. Thousands of comments. Some cruel. Some sympathetic. Some celebrating her humiliation like entertainment. But one thing surprised her most. People believed her. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Daniel opened the penthouse door moments later, and another man stepped inside carrying a slim leather briefcase. Tall, calm, dark charcoal suit perfectly tailored. Claire immediately recognized him from financial magazines and televised interviews. Julian Mercer, founder of Mercer Technologies, billionaire investor. Nathaniel's biggest corporate. Rival for nearly a decade. Claire blinked in confusion. "Julian." Daniel nodded once. "He has been helping investigate Graves Holdings quietly for months." Julian approached slowly, his expression measured but unexpectedly gentle when his eyes landed on Claire. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said softly. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." Claire stared at him carefully. "Why are you helping me?" Julian set the leather briefcase onto the marble table before answering. "Because Nathaniel Graves has spent years destroying people to protect himself." He opened the case calmly. Inside were photographs, transaction reports, internal company emails, and legal filings Claire had never seen before. One folder carried her name across the front in black ink. Claire's pulse quickened immediately. "What is this?" Julian looked directly at her. "Your husband transferred 23% ownership of Graves Capital into offshore holding companies 6 months ago." Claire frowned. "That is impossible. He only owns 51% himself." Julian's expression hardened slightly. "Not exactly." Daniel slowly slid another document across the table toward her. Claire looked down at the signature page and suddenly stopped breathing for half a second. Her name appeared directly beside Nathaniel's beneath the original incorporation agreement from 10 years earlier. Equal founding ownership. 50%. Claire looked up sharply. "Nathaniel told me I gave up my shares after the merger." Julian's voice remained calm. "You never did." The room fell silent except for rain against glass and distant Manhattan traffic far below the penthouse windows. Claire stared at the documents while realization slowly spread across her face like sunrise after endless darkness. Nathaniel had not only betrayed her, he had stolen from her. And somewhere downtown inside Graves' Capitol headquarters, federal auditors were already walking through the front doors. 3 days later, the entire financial world gathered inside the Manhattan Federal Courthouse beneath flashing cameras and pouring October rain. News vans lined the streets for nearly 2 blocks while reporters shouted questions through barricades at every black SUV pulling toward the marble entrance. By sunrise, the story had exploded across every major network in America. Billionaire fraud investigation, secret offshore accounts, public infidelity scandal, missing corporate assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But none of those headlines pulled attention like the woman stepping slowly out of Daniel Whitmore's vehicle wearing a fitted black maternity coat, with one steady hand resting against her 7-month pregnant belly. Claire Whitmore did not look broken anymore. She looked calm, and somehow that frightened Nathaniel Graves more than tears ever could. Camera flashes erupted instantly as she climbed the courthouse stairs beside Daniel and Julian Mercer. Reporters shouted questions over one another while rainwater shimmered against polished stone beneath their feet. Claire, did Nathaniel steal your shares? Mrs. Whitmore, are the fraud allegations true? Is Graves' Capitol collapsing? Claire never answered. She simply walked forward in silence while the city watched. Inside courtroom 7, the atmosphere felt electric. Investors filled the back rows beside journalists and federal observers, while attorneys moved quickly beneath cold fluorescent lighting. Nathaniel sat at the defense table wearing a dark charcoal suit, but the confidence that once made him untouchable had disappeared completely. For the first time since Claire met him 10 years ago, he looked tired. Truly tired. Vanessa sat several rows behind him dressed in pale cream instead of red now, avoiding eye contact with cameras while whispers followed her through the courtroom like smoke. Claire noticed it immediately, the distance between them. Even scandals had survival instincts. Nathaniel looked up the moment Claire entered. Their eyes locked across the courtroom. For half a second, everything else disappeared. No reporters, no cameras, no billion-dollar investigation. Just 2 people standing at the ruins of a life they once built together. Then Nathaniel noticed Julian walking beside her, and his expression darkened instantly. Federal prosecutor Eleanor Hayes approached the center of the courtroom carrying a thick stack of documents while conversations faded into silence. Your Honor, she began calmly. New evidence has been submitted this morning regarding concealed offshore transactions tied directly to Graves Holdings Incorporated. Paper folders slid across polished wood tables while reporters typed furiously. Nathaniel's attorney stood immediately objecting, but the judge barely looked impressed. Claire sat quietly beside Daniel while her pulse hammered beneath the soft fabric of her coat. She could hear cameras clicking every few seconds from the press row behind them. Then Eleanor Hayes spoke again. In addition to financial misconduct, evidence now confirms forged ownership transfers bearing Mrs. Whitmore's falsified signature over a period of 3 years. The courtroom erupted into whispers instantly. Nathaniel's face drained of color. Vanessa stared toward him in visible shock for the first time since this nightmare began. Claire remained still, completely still. Eleanor continued. Furthermore, original incorporation records confirm Mrs. Claire Whitmore legally retained 50% ownership of Graves' Capitol from its founding date onward. Absolute silence crashed through the courtroom. One reporter near the front row actually lowered his pen in disbelief. Nathaniel looked toward Claire sharply. Claire, he whispered under his breath, panic finally breaking through his composure completely. But she did not answer him. Across the courtroom, giant presentation screens flickered suddenly to life as federal investigators loaded security footage from the charity gala. The now famous video played in complete silence throughout the room. Vanessa brushing carelessly past Claire. Nathaniel standing motionless while his pregnant wife struggled to keep balance. Daniel stepping forward. Millions online had already watched it. But inside a federal courtroom surrounded by legal evidence and financial crimes, the footage felt different now. Final. Irreversible. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly as the video ended. Outside the courthouse, thunder rolled across Manhattan skies while stock alerts began flashing across investor phones throughout the courtroom. Graves Capital. Shares were collapsing in real time. And seated quietly at the center of the storm, Claire Whitmore finally understood something powerful. The moment a man stops fearing your pain is usually the exact moment he begins creating his own downfall. By the following week, Nathaniel Graves was no longer appearing on magazine covers. His face had disappeared from financial podcasts, investor conferences, and luxury business campaigns almost overnight. The same networks that once praised him as Manhattan's youngest self made Billionaire now replayed courthouse footage beside phrases like corporate fraud, forged ownership transfers, and federal investigation. Graves Capital stock had fallen nearly 60% in 4 trading days. Analysts called it one of the fastest collapses Wall Street had seen in years. But inside a quiet private hospital overlooking the East River, none of that mattered to Claire Whitmore anymore. Soft morning sunlight spilled gently through pale curtains, while the steady heartbeat monitor beside her bed filled the room with calm, rhythmic sound. Claire sat propped carefully against white pillows wearing a light blue sweater as one hand rested protectively over her newborn daughter, sleeping peacefully against her chest. Emma Grace Whitmore weighed 6 pounds and 11 ounces when she entered the world 2 days earlier with a full head of dark hair and the same blue eyes Claire remembered seeing in the mirror before life taught her how exhausting survival could become. Daniel stood quietly near the hospital window, holding coffee neither of them had touched, while rain drifted softly across the Manhattan skyline outside. "She has your eyes," he said quietly. Claire smiled faintly for the first time in what felt like years. Not the practiced smile she used at galas. Not the strained smile wealthy wives learned to wear beside difficult husbands. A real one. Small. Tired. Honest. The hospital room smelled faintly of lavender and warm blankets instead of expensive perfume and champagne. Claire realized she preferred this kind of quiet much more. Her phone rested untouched on the bedside table beside unopened flowers from attorneys, investors, reporters, and former friends suddenly eager to offer sympathy now that Nathaniel's empire was collapsing publicly. Vanessa Holloway had disappeared from social media entirely 3 days ago after federal investigators subpoenaed Graves Capital communication records. Several executives from Nathaniel's company had already resigned. One board member reportedly began cooperating with prosecutors. The empire Claire once helped build was crumbling floor by floor beneath the weight of its own secrets. Yet somehow she felt lighter now than she had in years. A soft knock interrupted the room. Julian Mercer stepped inside, carrying a small white gift bag, and paused when he saw Claire holding the baby. His usually controlled expression softened immediately. "I hope I am not interrupting." Claire shook her head gently. "You are not." Julian approached slowly before setting the gift bag near the flowers. Inside sat a tiny silver bracelet engraved with Emma's initials. Simple, elegant, thoughtful. "The legal transfer finalized this morning," he said quietly after a moment. "Your ownership shares are secured. The court approved full asset protection under your name and Emma's trust." Claire looked down at her sleeping daughter while absorbing the words slowly. 10 years ago, she helped build a billion-dollar company beside a man who convinced her she was lucky simply to stand beside him. Now she owned half of everything he once tried to hide from her. The irony almost felt poetic. Somewhere downstairs beyond the hospital walls, reporters were probably still waiting for updates about Nathaniel Graves. Rumors claimed he had left Manhattan temporarily